From Conestoga College, welcome to the Talent Hub Alumni Podcast, your trusted gateway into the success stories of graduates turned industry experts. I'm your host, Kim Crackle, a student affairs professional with over 11 years of experience supporting our amazing students. Join me as we explore our guest's journey from academia to the professional world, empowering you, our listeners, to unlock your path to greatness. So settle in, relax, and get ready to be inspired. In this episode of the Talent Hub Alumni Podcast, we welcome the dynamic Mike Farwell. Mike was born, raised, and educated in the Waterloo region. After studying at the University of Waterloo to become a teacher, he followed his dream of working in broadcasting and came to Conestoga to study in the Broadcasting, Radio, and Television program, from which he graduated in 1996. 4 months after graduating, Mike headed across the country for his first full-time radio job in Salmon Arms, British Columbia. He made several stops across Canada before coming home to the region. Mike is now the host of the Mike Farwell Show on CityNews 570 and the play-by-play voice for the Kitchener Rangers. Mike lost 2 sisters to cystic fibrosis, and 4 years ago he started the Farwell for Hire campaign in their memory, which has raised more than $1.2 million to date supporting cystic fibrosis research. Mike volunteers his time with several boards and committees and can also be found around town as the MC at community events. He's currently a member of Conestoga's Broadcasting, Radio, and Television Program Advisory Committee. Mike, it's a pleasure to have you with us. Let's get started.
It is wonderful to hear that kind of introduction. Thank you so very much for that.
Well, I feel like there's a lot of things I could have added to.
I've been called a lot of things over the years. Dynamic is not often one of them, so I'm very appreciative.
Oh, it's my pleasure. So let's get started. We wanted to have a fun question in this podcast to kind of get the conversation going. And so since I'm a bookworm, I'm curious, what is your favorite book?
I am so glad that you sent these questions to me to go over in advance, because had you not, I might have just been flubbering and stammering around trying to figure out. It's like picking your favorite child, right? Mine is Kaylee, by the way, because I only have one. So there you go. Anyway, but the reality is I would have a very difficult time picking just the one. So because you were able to prepare me, I will say among my favorites recently is Tanya Talega's excellent 7 Fallen Feathers, about 7 young Indigenous boys found dead in Thunder Bay. And that has a special connection to me because one of my stops in my radio career was up in Thunder Bay. Going back a little bit further, I'm a bit of a music geek. I love the band Rush. A member of that band who not too long ago passed, Neil Peart, had tremendous tragedy befall his life. He lost both his wife and his daughter, his wife to cancer, his daughter in a car crash. It was terrible. And so he hopped on his motorcycle and essentially found himself again, spent almost 2 years going around North America. So I'm a motorcyclist. I'm a Rush fan. Put that together in his book called Ghost Rider, and it was fantastic. I grew up on Hardy Boys books, and I still have all of them, the original hardcovers.
I'm a Nancy Drew fan.
Perfect. So right? So you know all about the mystery stories that we read as kids. I got into Stephen King, obviously, and I could go on and on about some of my favorites from him, including the original Gunslinger trilogy, The Dark Tower, which I absolutely loved. The Book of Negroes, which it was called in Canada. Someone Knows Her Name is the name it got, the title it got in other parts of the world, because I guess you can understand how the title here in Canada became problematic. But that was one of the One Book, One Community novels that we shared through the Kitchener Public Library. And it had a profound impact on me later in life. And going back to those Hardy Boys books days, The Book of Negroes by Lawrence Hill was one of those books that I stayed up. I was so enthralled with it that it was about 3 o'clock in the morning because it was, getting on bedtime, but I'm like, I'm so close to the end. And I kept going and going. And next thing you know, it's 3 a.m. I hadn't done that since I was cramming for exams. So anyway, I've already gone on long enough. I can't pick one, Kim, but thank you for asking, because I know that my one on my last breath, or I might just get it tattooed to myself. I'm not sure which, but it will be, but I'm not done reading the books yet. I'm not finished with all the books. I love them.
I love the passion. A lot of books that I haven't had a chance to read. So I keep track of all of these so that I can put them on my to-read list. But definitely, I have also been known to one more chapter.
Of course.
You got to do one more chapter. And I have a Kindle now, so I can actually read in the dark without waking anybody up. And so that's feeding a bad habit of staying up too late.
I was going to ask, see, I've never done an e-reader. And so my hack, I'm so old, and I'm going to use old school because that makes me feel less old. I have one of those little clips with the little light, right? So I can read in bed without disturbing anybody else. I don't have a lamp on. It just clips to the pages, and I've got a nice bright light because the older you get, Kim, the worse your eyes get. I didn't always have these things on my face, these glasses that I'm pointing to. Anyway, that's my hack. And yes, sometimes it's just a few more pages.
Yeah. Well, I think you and I are going to have a book podcast soon and
Would
chat
love to.
about books.
Call me back anytime. Let's go.
Perfect. So let's get started, and let's talk a little bit about your journey to Conestoga, because you started off wanting to be a teacher, and you started off, you have your undergrad from the University of Waterloo, but yet something drew you to broadcasting and to Conestoga. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm not sure I ever wanted to be a teacher. No disrespect to teachers, but so much as I thought I was supposed to be, or that's what people did who had real jobs. My father was a teacher, so I grew up in a household that was very traditional. Mom was stay at home. Dad went out and worked every day, and that's just the impression I got of what someone who works looks like, acts like, etc. But my entire life, I was fascinated, not even just by broadcasting so much as by radio. I just couldn't get enough of it. So in my heart of hearts, all I ever really wanted to do was work in radio. But I didn't think that was a real job. I didn't really understand that as a career path. I did fairly well academically. So when I got to high school, I got on the track. This was way before de-streaming was a thing. I was on the academic track in high school. You're going to go to post-secondary, and post-secondary is going to be a university, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Even when I worked with guidance counselors about what do you want to do when you graduate from this school, getting into broadcasting and or radio was never spoken of. So I just went with the traditional path, or what I felt was a traditional path. And then after getting through my undergrad and getting the opportunity to spend a full year as a supply teacher for a teacher who took a long-term leave for illness, I realized this is not what I want to do. And I took a U-turn, and that's what led me to Conestoga College. I did the U, and the Conestoga College was right there for me.
That's amazing. And it's so great to hear that story, because we meet with so many students that think, I've committed to this one path. I can't change, or I need to keep, I started in this program and I got to see it through, or my parents really want me to be a XYZ. But it sounds like you pursued your passion and your heart. And when you do that, great success can come to you.
That's exactly what I did. And, I should point out as well that my parents supported me every step of the way. They didn't, at least not intentionally, put me on this path. It's just what I had decided for myself based on what I saw around me. This is the way things work, and this is what you should do. When I said, because I did feel a little bit weird, like I'm on the path, I'm going to be a teacher just like Dad. I'm like, you know what, Mom and Dad, like I think I want to do this broadcasting thing, and I'm going to stop this path, and I'm going to go and pursue a diploma at Conestoga College. And, so yes. And I also recognize that I was so lucky to always know. I talk to so many young people today, and the advice you gave, what you just said, makes so much sense. If you know at 17 or 18 what you want to do for the rest of your life, God bless you. Yep. But not only is it okay to change along the way, there are so many more opportunities out there, so many more possibilities. Fill your boots with all of them.
Well, it's so interesting that you say that, because when I started at Conestoga College, there are jobs that you can get now that didn't exist 5-10 years ago.
My job barely exists anymore. The very first radio station I worked at, I got a part-time job in my second year of school at Conestoga at a radio station in Brantford that just this past summer went dark.
Oh.
That's our word for closing. It went, they shut it off. So yes, not only are there jobs that had never even been conceived of when I was going to school here, but the job I started in literally doesn't exist. The entire station is gone.
Wow. That's changed for you,
It
right?
It is.
So we found out what brought you to Conestoga. Let's talk a little bit about your time when you were a student there. It was like 3 years ago. So
I fresh in my mind.
Yeah.
It feels like just yesterday. Yeah.
What's one thing that stands out to you as, something that you're really proud of your time when you were a student at Conestoga College?
I didn't get kicked out.
That's a win.
I remember early on one of my favorite instructors who I remain close to this day. We're still good friends. But he stopped mid-lecture and looked at me and said, "Do you come with an off switch?" And I reflect on that. He caught me off guard and kind of, made me stop short, especially because I respected him so immensely and I did not want to get on his bad side. I didn't want to be as rude to him as I clearly was being. But to be identified as that person who might have a higher volume than the other 30 or so in the class when you're already a class of creatives and performers, et cetera. That was a bit of a moment for me. And I say that in jest. I mean, looking back, I was never really in danger of being kicked out or anything like that. But I think most proud of was the effort that I put into the work at the school, especially in our third year, the way the program was structured when I was attending. It was a 3-year diploma program, broadcast, radio, and television. For 2 years, you took general broadcasting for both, and in your third year, you chose a specialization. Do you want to specialize in TV or radio? Very few of us went on the radio track, but that was my focus from day one. And especially in that year, I treated my schoolwork, if you will, at the radio station, which wasn't even over the air back then. CJIQ today, oh my goodness, and I get to listen to these students all the time. But for us, it was only internal to offices and the cafeteria at the school. But I still treated that as if I was going to work every day, as if I was going to a radio station every day. And I'm pretty proud of that. And I think it helped me make the transition to the real radio stations, if you will, the real world, a little bit easier.
I think that's a really great tip for students, like current students that are in here is, your school is kind of your job while you're here, right? So kind of treat it, put yourself on a schedule, put the effort into, the activities and the assignments and things like that. And it's just going to make you that much more prepared when you graduate.
No question. And the opportunities that exist, I'm sure it's still very similar. They were around the clock. You had to get special permissions for certain times of the day. But, if you're working while you're going to school, all these other things, you could come back and do this and do that. And I can tell you, certainly when I started in radio, that was not uncommon at all. My very first part-time job was from midnight until 6. And while I'm there overnight, usually the only person in the station, sometimes some of the full-timers would come back in. They had been at an event or a sporting, whatever it was, and they're still coming into the station at all hours, right? So those foundational skills and the oddness of the hours, certainly if you get used to them in school, you're going to fit right in.
Good practice.
Yeah.
Was there a moment that stood out as particularly meaningful or impactful, whether it happened to you sort of on the academic side or personally while you were in school, that kind of shaped your time there?
It was my very first day. And it's that same instructor I was referencing earlier who I developed a great respect for early and still maintain a great friendship with. He's a wonderful man. And it was day one, and it was a very casual day. You're just kind of getting used to things, getting a sense of what's expected of you. And I don't know, 20 minutes. It was very short class. However, after the class had finished, there was another one of my classmates who also knew this instructor because they lived in the same neighborhood. So my classmate struck up a conversation, and the conversation was all about the local radio scene. And this instructor, and I should tell you, Paul Scott is his name, who's, again, just incredible. And Paul knew everything. He knew every personality on every radio station, what kind of music they were playing, all of these different things. And I overheard the conversation, and then I kind of lingered and listened and drank it all in. I'm like, this is exactly why I'm here. This is the stuff that excites me. And this man is going to be my beacon for the next 3 years. And then the son of a gun, you know what he did? He left. He left after 2 years, and he went out to British Columbia to Salmon Arm to work in radio, which is how I ended up out there when I finished school and graduated. But anyway, that first day stands out to me vividly. It just, for me, helped me understand that I was in the right place and I was doing what I wanted to do.
Amazing. And that is a great segue to always keep in touch with your professors.
Yes, for sure. For sure. And we just exchanged Christmas cards and promised, as always, this is what happens, kids, when you get older. We'll get together. Yeah, we will, maybe, eventually. But yes, we do often enough still see one another.
There's always the promise, right?
That's right.
So let's talk post-graduation. Let's talk about all of the dynamic stuff you've been doing since then. What's one thing in your career journey to date that you didn't expect was going to happen? Or, did your current journey zig when you thought it was going to zag? Or...
Yeah, I can tell you with utmost honesty that the job I am doing today that I love, I never expected to be doing. I didn't even expect to be doing news ever. I wasn't going to be a reporter. I wasn't going to be a news anchor. And I sure as shoot wasn't going to be a talk show host. And here I am. And I'm 6+ years into a talk show here in Kitchener on CityNews 570. And yeah, but that was a complete departure from what I expected I would be doing. But along the way, and I gave this a little bit of thought before I came here to sit down with you today, I think it comes with just saying yes when opportunities present themselves. And sometimes maybe you make the opportunity for yourself, but saying yes. So sure, I started off as a DJ playing some music on a radio station and then took a step into a role in a newsroom. And that began my journey kind of in this direction. And along the way, I picked up a little sports. And next thing you know, you're a talk show host and a play-by-play guy, and never would I ever have thought this is where I'd be sitting.
And taking those risks are really critical, right? And so important. It's the whole, you never know where you're going to be until you try it. You never know if you're going to like it until you try it. I mean, I've said that to my children.
It's so true. And you're clearly a very good mother because I've decided I'll give you the radio edit of this. I'll clean it up. But a good friend of mine whose guidance has meant a lot over my career said to me one day, everybody has to have an oh bleep moment. And so that was one of the times early on that I decided, okay, oh bleep, here I go. And I did. And onward ho. And so yes, is exactly what you just said. You don't have to be positive of it. And every once in a while, if you scare yourself just a little bit, perfect.
You never know what's going to grow from that.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So you've talked about that one Professor Paul. Are there other people that, have kind of championed you on your journey that have been supporters or mentors or role models to you?
All of them. I was also thinking back on the professors we were fortunate enough to have while I was here at Conestoga College. Mike DeBoule, Bob Curry, who was our Mr. Fix-It engineer guy. And these are guys, again, who I still stay in touch with to this day. I'll see them at events. We'll just touch base every once in a while. Anyway, Bob's son, Rob, is on the program advisory committee with me. I mean, it's a tight little group, and it's a great group. So yes, and then classmates too. Two of my best friends to this day are guys that I met while going to school at Conestoga College. And one of them is, he's very, very good on the television production side of things. So anytime, and the number of times, I could never repay the hours that he has put in to help me with demo reels, to give me advice when I started doing some TV, all these different things. Just a great resource for me. So there have been countless over the years. But while I was here, the people that led us by way of instruction, and then I've met so many through my career as well. I just actually was having I had a moment. We just got our ratings out, and they weren't exactly what I wanted. And there's a manager I used to work for that I've maintained a good relationship with, and I always liked his perspective. I just phoned him up. Like, hey, Pete, can we have a talk about this? Because I really need your perspective. And he was more than willing. And there have been a few like that along the way that I've been very fortunate to have met in the industry doing the work. And their guidance and advice from time to time has been invaluable to me.
It's really important to be able to kind of pick those people out and keep them close to your heart and near and dear to you.
You bet.
For all of those exact situations. If we think about your journey from school to work, have there been any decisions that you've made? I know we've talked a little bit about you saying, say yes to those things, but is there one kind of big yes that really stands out, whether it's personal or professional, that's really kind of shaped how things have happened? I know you've worked at different stations along the way, and you've traveled across the country working at different stations.
Yeah, I could, at almost every turn, I could probably find a pretty big yes, right? That first big yes to get on a plane and go to British Columbia for my first full-time job. Mm-hmm. I'd never left the province before. So, I'm a born and raised Kitchener boy. That was a pretty big deal. Making the decision to move immediately from that job into a news job, which I had never done before. Later on, I took a pretty big leap, I think, when I left the all-news station and went to a top 40 station that had just started up in town, but wanted to get the managerial position they were offering and build some experience that way. I could probably spend, an hour documenting every yes along the way, but it all comes back to that willingness too. I even took a brief little hiatus from radio and actually made money for a while. Have you told the kids that they don't make a lot of money in radio? Do you know that part yet?
We haven't told them that
Okay,
part.
no. We'll edit that out later, Felipe. If you don't mind, just take that out, okay? But I was working in corporate communications and filling my bank account, but not my soul, not my bucket. And so it's actually at 570 in a previous incarnation of the station, and they wanted me to come back, and they had offered me a job, and I'm like, I can't come back for that kind of money. And then eventually I did. Mm-hmm. And it was a big moment. It was a 50% pay cut, but I'm like, this is what I want to do. And I haven't looked back since. And I'm so grateful. So kids, even if you don't make much money, it's great. It's such rewarding work. It really is.
It's like what is that movie, Sliding Doors,
Yeah.
If you could go, just one of those moments could take you in a completely different direction. You could have stayed in that corporate communications job and, be successful, but unfulfilled.
That's right. And when you talk about that, again, I could go on for an hour, but I left Salmon Arm when I was 26, 27 years old, mm-hmm. in and around there. Anyway, and look, it was a tiny town. I'm in my mid-20s. I want to work in Toronto, right? I'm going to be on Hockey Night in Canada, or I'm going to be on Q107 or something like that. What am I doing in this little hick town? I look back now at Salmon Arm, British Columbia, the houseboat capital of Canada. Hell, why didn't I stay there? God's country, come on. So but I didn't stay there, and here I am, and I'm not unhappy at all.
But you got to have that experience, right?
You bet.
You got to have that experience. Can you talk a little bit about maybe a challenge or an obstacle that you kind of were faced with, and sort of that you had to either go over it or go around it somehow? break through it?
Yeah. You know, one of the biggest obstacles I had early on was my own faith in my own abilities. And it was a real challenge for me. And, you know, like, if you'll forgive the expression, you're kind of exposed, you're kind of naked in this job sometimes, because I say to people quite often that, as counterintuitive as it sounds, I'm not the most extroverted person. I didn't get on the radio because I wanted to be on the radio and people would hear my voice and you know, want to hear anything like that. I liked the business of it. I just liked the job. I thought it'd be cool. I wouldn't care if anybody was listening on the other side, but of course they have to. Otherwise, I don't have a job very long. But there's just this. There's a vulnerability. That's probably the best word to use. And it took me a long time. It took me a long time to have just enough confidence in myself that no matter what I look like on TV, like, have you seen this head of hair? That was I wondered early on. My good buddy I mentioned before, I asked him, like, should I get a toupee? Should I put some hair on this head? And so I had to get comfortable in my own skin with that part of me. And that was a pretty big thing for me to overcome. And then along the way, there are those challenges that you meet. You're asking yourself, is Salmon Arm going to be the place I want to stay and put down the roots? And that wasn't it. I had always had this idea of, if I can get back to the region of Waterloo, I'll be pretty happy. But gosh, you know, before I do that, I better try at least the biggest media market in the country in Toronto. So a lot of it was self-doubt that I had to overcome. Along the way, I don't think it would be altogether different than folks in other jobs. You run into some tough managers, you run into some tough personalities, but I think we all, with experience, find a way to navigate those waters.
Amazing. Thank you. It's always comforting when we hear other people's kind of challenges and how they kind of go through, you know, working through that problem, because I'm a big believer in that if one person's experienced it, a lot of people have. And to hear about those, it brings people together. Yeah.
And, you know, I'm thinking now, too, at that very first radio station out west, we had an afternoon announcer who had a voice that was gifted to him from the heavens. It was incredible. And then you put me next to him, and I'm like, what am I even doing in this business?
Mike, we love your
Kim,
voice.
Thank you. You're very kind. And it has developed over the years, but honestly, it's nothing. If I could get him on the phone right now, you'd be like, what is this? Like, is this Jesus Christ himself talking to us right now? Honest to goodness. And I felt so intimidated and so out of place. And he couldn't have been a nicer guy. He didn't do anything, but it was just me trying to find my place in those waters. Oh, goodness gracious. Great guy, though. Learned a lot from him.
Well, and that's what you got to do, right? You got to take those little opportunities and glean as much from them as possible. So what's next for you, Mike? You've done so much in your career. Do you have more goals? What's the next thing on your agenda?
You know, it's interesting you ask that. Is survival an okay answer in this context? I mean,
after the last few years, yes.
Yeah, things have been, I mean, and listen, we are in as rapid a state of change as I've ever seen in my near 30 years in this industry. Things are coming at us a mile a minute, and I think we're kind of trying to find our place and figure out some things. But you reach a certain point in your career, and look, I'm much closer to the end now than I am at the beginning, and I don't think the beginning of my career me would recognize this me. Again, you know, working in talk radio when you thought you'd be on Hockey Night in Canada or on an FM music station or something like that. But also I always had in my mind that I wanted to come back home to work in my hometown. I wasn't certain at that time that once I did, I would want to stay. I just wanted to have that experience. Mm-hmm. But the longer I stayed, the more I wanted to stay. So I think my answer in terms of a goal, not that I don't have any. I have those personal goals attached to the work that I do. Mm-hmm. I want to be better every day than I was the day before. The day I mail it in is the day I quit. Like I will not allow myself to do that. I pour everything that I can into the execution of my show every single day. I will not cut a corner. I will not eat green eggs and ham. I will not, Sam, I am. So that's my motivation every day. But career-wise, aspirationally, I've reached the summit. Like I'm so happy where I am. I've had the chance to do Toronto. I've had opportunities that I turned down because I wanted to stay home as I got later in my career. I'm really happy. It wouldn't excite anybody to tell you that really at this point, I'd like to just be able to go out on my own terms. And I'm not sure that'll happen. I hope it does, but it's changing a lot and it's changing fast and I'm not getting any younger, but I'm ecstatic where I am.
I think everybody would love to be able to say that about their career and to say what I'm doing right now fulfills me.
Yes.
And I'm happy and I'm doing something that I'm passionate about.
You just answered it better than I did. Do you want to switch roles here?
No.
You should do this.
Listen, I'm learning from the best here. I'm learning from the best.
That is perfectly stated.
So you've kind of alluded to this in terms of like, where do you see like radio broadcasting, the news industry, like 5 years, like things are changing at breakneck speeds here.
They are. And I think back often to my earliest days and the internet was the big threat, right? Who's going to listen to Mike Farwell do the network night shift, as we called it, in Salmon Arm from 6 until midnight on Mondays and Tuesdays, when they can use this internet thing to listen to any station anywhere in the world, right? And also, if you are any station anywhere in the world, why would you make your station available on this internet thing? People have to turn on a radio. Yeah, and like, believe me, this was the thing in 1996. Mm-hmm. So even think about that. We're not 30 years removed. And to say that we were afraid of the internet just sounds so weird because it is so connected to what we do today. But that's where we were then. And I would look at that as the second existential challenge for the radio industry. The first was television, right? Because we were here first. Thank you very much. Then, Talking with Pictures came along, and oh boy, that's going to be the death of radio. Well, we survived that. Mm-hmm. In 96, we only got an internet feed, like the Sun. I'm going to lose it. SunNet. Anyway, we had some internet ISP in Salmon Arm that provided us a dial-up connection, right? But that's how new all of this was. We absolutely survived that and have been thriving again. And so here we are today in this pace of such rapid change. I am excited by the emergence of podcasts and the fact that people still want to listen to content like this, audio content. And I think when I look at the future, and I wish I had a crystal ball, because I really believe we're at a place right now where we're a little bit dizzy and that landscape is a little bit blurry because there's so much going on. And I get the sense we're just trying to pluck the pieces that we think might work. And some of them we've plucked and we're like, nope, we don't like the way that one smells. We throw it back out, right? And we try something else. But when I look ahead, I still believe that people that do work like I do may not do it in the same ways. CityNews 570 might not still be here as an over-the-air radio station in 15 years. But will I still be creating content for a media company like Rogers? I think that's very possible, if not likely, if they want me to be the creator of that content. But while the delivery mechanism may change, I think what we're doing with the creation of audio and the sharing of ideas is going to continue. That's where I see us going. If I had the crystal ball, that's what mine's telling me.
That's amazing. I love hearing what you think, what your perspective is of down the line of what you think is going to be happening, and I think it's hard for me to wrap my head around, a world without radio, because I actually listen to the radio all the time.
And many people still do, believe it or not. But gosh darn it, not enough of them anymore. So we're working on that. And maybe we can get them to come back to it, right? And find ways to give them something that they still need, or at least want. If you like it, you're going to keep coming back for it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So let's say we're talking to a student who's thinking about going into the broadcasting program here at Conestoga. What kind of advice would you give them?
We've touched on this, and the biggest piece would be that saying yes. But also, versatility is going to be your best friend. So I'll just remind you that when I started, I never, in my wildest dreams, imagined that I would be hosting a talk show. Hell, I didn't even read newspapers. I really didn't. Like, what did I care about the news? I want to do sports. I want to play music, whatever. So it just kind of developed along the way because I said yes to things. But also, I have done, with the exception, I would say, of sales. And even to this day, I think sometimes I do a little bit of that because you're out in the community. You're always representing the company or the brand or the show. And maybe you can entice some people to spend some money on your station, whatever. Anyway, any job in the radio station that needed doing, I have done. I've answered the phones. I have recorded and edited commercials. I have scheduled music. I've played music. I've hosted talk shows. I've read newscasts. I've reported on stories live. You name it. So that would be my number one piece of advice, along with saying yes to the opportunities and maybe having your bleep moments along the way. Just don't pigeonhole yourself. Yeah, maybe you want to be a producer. Awesome. Be a producer, but be willing to learn other jobs within that production house or within that radio station. And that versatility, that adaptability will do you very well in the future.
I can kind of picture you, learning all these jobs, and then somebody says, oh my goodness, we need somebody to do this. And then you can just say, I know how to do that.
100%. And that's happened. That has literally happened. Oh yeah, I can do that. Well, I'll tell you what. Yeah, I'm so old. How old are you? I'm so old that when I was editing and creating commercials, I had to use a razor blade and physically cut a piece of tape. Now, you can just undo on these systems today, right? Just click a button. No. If I made a mistake, I didn't know until I put the tape back together. So you never threw out the piece you cut out. Like, you figure out how to work with this stuff, but you take out this piece of tape, you tape it together, and then you listen back. Oh, bleep, I just made a mistake. So I have to put the piece of tape back in that I already cut out. I'm telling you, you have no idea how lucky you are to have a dump button, an undo. You kids today.
Oh, Mike, it's been such a pleasure having you join us today. For our listeners, if you want to hear Mike live on air, check him out weekdays from 10 until 2 p.m. on CityNews 570, or listen to his play-by-plays as he cheers on our Kitchener Rangers.
I am very much a homer. I do cheer as I say he shoots, he scores, and I think that's allowed.
Yes, I think so too. His passion for the OHL doesn't stop at the Rangers. You can also check out Mike's podcast, the OHL Podcast, through Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And for more information about the amazing work Mike is doing raising funds for cystic fibrosis, please visit Farwell for Hire, and we'll make sure that all of these links are in our show notes for you as well.
This has been so much fun for me, thinking back on the various stops along the way. So thank you for indulging me in this. Is anybody bored yet? Is anybody still listening? Did I do okay?
Mike,
see, this is my
perfect.
Self-doubt coming out. Was I okay?
You were great.
They like me. They really like me, Kim.
We love you. Thanks again, Mike.
Thank you so much.
A pleasure. We've reached the end of this episode of the Talent Hub Alumni Podcast. Thank you for listening. We appreciate your support and hope that this episode fills you with inspiration and serves as a catalyst for finding your passion and path. For resources and materials to help you propel your career and employment, head over to conestogac.on.ca/talent-hub. If you're a Conestoga grad or know one who has a great story, email us at talenthub@conestogac.on.ca. Links will be in our show notes. Please don't forget to subscribe, comment, and connect with us. We love hearing from our listeners and value your feedback. Remember, what you do here counts out there.